The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Welcome once again to our view on public safety. This morning I have a couple of fire inspectors, Jeff Medeiros and Claton Walker. We're going to talk about fire prevention this morning. Some topics that people kind of know about, but they don't really adhere to. So either one of you guys, let's talk about grill safety, and particularly on decks. So anybody can pick that up.
So,
Claton or Jeff.
First of all, we always want people to be proactive. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's part of our job. Me and Jeff's job is to be proactive in fire prevention. So our whole goal is to not have any fires in Fall River. As far as grill safety, it should always be 10 feet away from a structure. You are not supposed to have that blocking a fire escape. We'll talk about that later with air conditioners. But things like on a fire escape or on any type of multifamily house, or I've seen grills on like high-rise buildings, right on the little deck. That's not allowed.
Right.
But there's only so many people, so many fire prevention guys that go around the city and ask people to take those and get rid of them on those decks, because that could be. I went to one fire that was in the south end. It was horrible. I actually watched a guy, as I'm masking up, I watched a guy weeping into his hands because we were the third engine on scene, deep south end, so I came from Bedford Street, and half of his house was on fire. Later on, we learned that the investigators did the investigation, and what I saw was the guy was crying because he burnt his house down. He had his grill literally 6 inches away from his house, and of course the flames leapt under, caught the aluminum siding. Once it was in the aluminum siding, he decided to grab a garden hose, true story, grab a garden hose and try to shoot it up as opposed to calling the fire department. At that point in time, the fire's already in there, it's racing to your roof. You want to call fire department as quick as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. People don't understand that you cannot have a grill close to the house, particularly vinyl siding, because it'll melt.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, how many calls people fire alarm receives because there's a grill, people see the flames, it's just confined to the grill, they're cooking, but it looks like an actual fire. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that happens. There was a fire on Star Street, the same thing. The guy had it on the deck, and his deck burnt, the house burnt. Particularly if the grease starts dripping,
right.
Oh, yeah.
Then you have a problem.
So multifamilies, you're not allowed to have it on your deck or your porch. It has to be 10 feet away from the structure on the ground. As far as a single family, if there's 2 ways off that porch or deck, as long as if it's 10 feet away, that's allowed. But there needs to be 2 ways off that deck, because part of it too is, if you think about it, with the grill, if you box yourself in, and if anybody would like to look it up on YouTube, take a look and see what an LPG tank does when it catches fire. It becomes like a flamethrower. And if you're blocked in, you're never getting out of that area unless you jump over the porch. And so, again, just some safety. I mean, even at home, you know, my girlfriend's house is single family, but we have the grill away when we're cooking. We put it down on the ground, keep it 10 feet away from the house. She has a deck. But, you know, things happen. Fires happen. You know, all of a sudden you're cooking something with high grease content. It could flare up. I would much rather have to bring that grill back on the porch when I'm done using it than to try to put out a fire at that point in time. So
the other thing that Jeff mentioned was the propane tank. And he said the flamethrower. The storage of those should not be in your basement in a way, the dwelling, it's just going to explode and go up. That should be in a secured, like a shed or outside. It should not be where people are living that could explode.
Right.
Let's just touch on air conditions and windows and ways of egression. People block windows if they're in a fire escape. People block back stairways.
Right.
All the time.
Let's talk about that, and so we can enlighten people.
Well, that's one of the biggest things as far as with the warm weather coming. People have limited space. Next thing you know, we're driving around the city.
All the time.
And it's an air conditioner and a fire escape window. And a lot of people think, oh, I'll be okay. You know, if fire happens, I'll be able to get it out. And you're not going to be able to. In a real fire, you know, unlike what they show on different fire shows like Chicago Fire, Backdraft, in a real fire, your visibility and what you can see is limited at best. In a lot of cases, the fires Clay and I have been in, you can't see a thing. So figure you're asleep, you wake up at 3 in the morning, you're not going to get to that window and get that air conditioner out in order to use the fire escape. So we'll drive around the city, warm weather comes, and that's one of the things that creates a lot of complaints for us. That we'll go, if we see an air conditioner in a fire escape window, we'll follow up on that with either the person who's renting or the building owner to have it removed, because it is a violation, and in reality, it's going to cause a lot of problems for that individual. You know, if for some reason there's a fire, it's going to impede you from getting out of the house. And at that point, you don't want to delay your escape from the house.
We see it constantly, Chief, in house sales. So when we do house sales, we have to do a smoke and CO inspection, as you know, constantly in the summer. We have to tell people to take that out because everybody thinks it's just it's what people think. If it doesn't happen, it's not going to happen to me until, unfortunately, it happens.
It happens.
And then Jeff describes the horrible scenario of waking up 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't get out.
You know, I've been in houses when after the fire, we do the fire report and surveying and all that stuff at the Red Cross. And it amazes me, hoarders, and it also amazes me how they block their back stairway.
Yep.
And they block their way of egression from the back of the house. I mean, you know, you have the front stairway and the back is like cluttered with junk.
Yep.
I mean, that's another fire.
It becomes a secondary closet for a lot of people. Yeah. And again, if for some reason the main stairwell that you're used to coming in and out of every single day, if for some reason that's the source and location of the fire, that second means of egress, that second stairwell is really important, which is why that's another one of our very typical complaints that we get, that when we'll go, we'll find bikes, we'll find, in some cases, it becomes the shoe closet, and just other items, and we'll tell the people, you know, listen, you can't have this in the hallway because it's going to create a tripping hazard. If you're lucky, in a lot of cases, the hallways are impassable because there's so much in the hallways. So that's one of the complaints that we follow up on a regular basis.
The other thing also is basement apartments, but only one way of egress and not two ways, and that's illegal as well, right? To have
yeah, we've had to call building department several times, again on house inspections that we notice there's an illegal apartment down there, and they're excellent. They come down and work very closely with us.
And that happens quite often when they have people have apartments in the basement, illegal apartments.
Yep.
We got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Go
ahead. I'm sorry, go
just,
ahead.
No, back to the hoarding thing. It not only impedes the person's exit, but can you imagine a fire crew, because I've been in a couple, Jeff's been in plenty, trying to get in and get to the dog or get to the cat, you know what I mean? And you are in a maze of stuff. Plus, most of the stuff that's in the hoarding is combustible. Mm-hmm. So you're adding fuel
to the fire.
To that fire.
Yeah.
And it's just, we deal with it a lot.
I think a lot of people, summer's coming as well, and pool safety. Particularly when you have a pool put in, you think you can wire it yourself. You have to have breaks and all that stuff.
Right.
So let's talk about pool safety somewhat, because, summer's coming.
Right. So one of the biggest things, if you have a pool, you never want to leave the kids unattended. That's one of the biggest things. And then also, if you have a pool, you want to make sure that area is fenced off. God forbid, we see it every year in the news. I'm sure you see it. The 2-year-old was walking by the pool, fell in the pool, tragic result. So with summer coming, pool safety, water safety, You know, one of the things I was looking at recently, they said especially if you have a toddler, you want to make sure that toddler is within reach if they're next to the water, which is really good advice because, I mean, it just takes a second. And
even those little like wade-in pools for the real small kids, if they're left unattended, they could drown in 1 feet of water.
Right.
People have drowned in bathtubs. So you got to be safe.
Yeah, you have to be safe. And most of the time when you put a pool in, you have to have it inspected by the building inspector or wiring inspector.
Right.
Because it's already wired in,
right.
The pool pump and all that stuff, right?
Right. That's something that they need to pull a building permit on, and again would cause a electrical permit to also be pulled for any of the wiring, lighting, you know, especially on some of these pools. They have the in-pool lighting and the same thing with the filtering systems. So you want to make sure that all that's wired appropriately and grounded so you're not running into a shock hazard. You know, so, I mean, pretty much everybody within inspectional services, they're there to help you and to advise you. And all of us, basically, we just want you to do the right thing so you'll be safe. That's really what it comes down to. And I know they see it the same way, the building officials, the plumbing and electrical people. If you ever have a question, you can call them at the building department. If you have a question regarding fire, you can call us up at headquarters. You know, we're really your friends. We just want you to live safe.
Absolutely.
That's all.
So we're talking about the outside. Let's talk about outside burn. I think I've got a few calls at my office about people inquiring about, they think emergency management, about outside burning. I say, I have nothing to do with outside burning.
Right.
But what's the law about outside burning? Everybody thinks they can burn in a pit. They can get hot dogs and put it next to their fire pit and say, oh, we're just cooking hot dogs. But it doesn't always work that way, does it?
No, it doesn't. See, a lot of people think we're in charge of that. That law and regulation does not come under us. That comes through Mass DEP. And what they did was, when they sat down and crafted this regulation, what they did was they took all of the bigger cities. Fall River happens to be one of them. And we are in an exclusive no burn zone because it's a city. So you have Worcester, you have Taunton, Brockton, Fall River, New Bedford, Boston, and other communities. Due to the density of the housing stock, it's just not safe to open burn. So Fall River is not an open burn community, so it is not allowed. Now, some people say, well, I got a fire pit. Okay, well, you have a fire pit. Now is where we come into that gray area, okay? So is the fire a nuisance fire? So what's a nuisance to you? What's a nuisance to me? What's a nuisance to Claton? So basically, when we look at it, is if somebody's burning clean wood, no yard waste, no trash, no building materials, if that smoke is impinging on somebody else's property, that's considered to be a nuisance fire. Engine will come, make you put it out. You can have a fire in order to cook. Again, though, if it's a nuisance fire and that smoke is going into somebody else's house, they're going to have you put it out. But as far as like burning of yard waste and anything like that, not allowed in the city of Fall River.
Yeah, you hear a lot of call of outside burning, an engine will go and put it out and
Right.
so forth. Yeah, that's a question that I think people don't really understand. It's not a Fall River law. It's the fire marshal's law. It's a state law.
It's a Mass DEP law.
The large cities and towns.
Yeah, Department of Environmental Protection. It actually comes under them, which kind of leaves us sometimes in the judgment calls as to what's a nuisance fire and what isn't a nuisance fire. But again, that regulation comes from the Department of Environmental Protection.
Okay, so on outside stuff, let's talk about fireworks. Fireworks is that's people think they did get fireworks, buy them in Tiverton, bring them to Fall River, and just set them off all over the place. Not allowable, correct?
Not allowed. I mean, Massachusetts, they're illegal. You should really leave it to the professionals. I mean, we have a great 4th of July display that me and Jeff always do the packing for, and you know, make sure it's safe to go off that day. But yeah, people should not be setting off illegal fireworks. Things like bottle rockets and stuff we've seen where they can get caught in some piece of the house and catch fire. So it really is a fire risk.
Right, and even with the sparklers,
Yep.
those sparklers burn at anywhere between 800 to 1200 degrees. So if you have a youngster holding on to one of those sparklers, if they just happen to touch their skin with that, they're going to get a severe burn. So, like Clayton said, leave the fireworks to the professionals.
Go to our show. And,
yeah, go to the show, enjoy
Exactly.
it.
Absolutely.
Beautiful show that we have here in Fall River.
Yeah, it is.
But, you know, don't be handling fireworks.
Extension cords. That's a big one because people use zip cords and plug 100 things into one cord and all their appliances. That's the potential fire hazard right there.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be UL rated. It has to be, you know, only a certain amount coming out of that outlet. One of the biggest things that we teach when we do the senior stuff, me and Jeff, is tripping hazards. So when those things are running under carpets and stuff, a lot of the elderly can trip and really get hurt, like hip injuries and stuff like that. So it should all be UL listed. There's limited capacity. I got to be a biggest liar because my wife plugs a lot of things into this one particular with a hair dryer and the hair straightener and everything else is going off. And I cringe every time. I go, Susie, come on. You know, I do work for the fire department, so I get it. People can get complacent, and it's tough to tell your loved one to take it easy on that. But
Particularly the one that washes your clothes and irons your clothes.
yeah.
No, but the rule is usually one high yield device, and if you have a high power device, you want to plug that directly into the wall, not into the expandable outlet where you have the Christmas trees, you know, a 3-to-1, and plugging them in the 3-to-1 to expand what you can use. Those can overheat very easily. So, you know, plug directly into the outlet.
We see a lot of older houses where we have fires where the electrical fires because of bad wiring. People think they can just wire their own house, and
Right.
that's another problem.
That's another problem. Moving forward, I think you're going to see that becomes more of a problem due to the old wiring that we have in the older homes. Unfortunately, the state took this up. The Massachusetts building regulations took this up to see if they could do anything with retroactivity regarding wiring, and the cost within the state was so high that it wasn't something that they could entertain. But, you know, if you own a home, if you have some extra money, you're looking at doing some improvements. If you have old wiring, take a look at, you know, updating your wiring, because as time goes on, that wiring's not getting newer and it's not insulated in some cases. The insulating jackets at one time were made of almost like a cloth-like material. And after 100 years, that cloth is worn off, and you're pretty much looking at just wiring now.
Yeah, definitely get it done by a professional. Again, when we're on those house inspections, if we notice that something's been remodeled, you know, a bunch, then we will actually say, did you pull a permit to do this? And we get in touch with, again, building department. So we're working hand in hand with them, because a lot of people do their own stuff, and not all of them are master electricians, which leads to dangerous stuff.
When I bought my house, we was all the fuses.
Yes.
So we had an electrician come in, he did the rewiring, he put the circuit breakers in, and he did all that stuff. And he checked all the wiring, so the wiring wasn't too bad. He pulled some of the plugs out of the walls and stuff like that. But he did a lot of rewiring inside the garage, in the house, the basement. Oh, it was a small project, became a big project.
Yeah.
But because my house was built in 1953, it's, you know, so.
Right.
few years on it. Let's talk about smoke and CO2 detectors. That's another big thing. People pull the batteries out, they keep beeping and stuff like that. That's not good, right?
So smoke detectors, yeah, that's year-round. That's a year-round subject, not just summer.
Yeah.
We now have these built-in battery smoke detectors where the battery is included. You don't have to worry about pulling the battery out anymore. Those are now what we require. We want CO detectors within 10 feet of a bedroom. It has to have voice if it's a dual detector. There's a lot of regulations. If you're selling a property, here's a suggestion. If you're selling a property and you're totally unsure, you can call us and ask, but we basically can't just go out there. We're too busy to tell you what you need. There are companies that you can call at a very minimal amount of money to get them professionally go in there, redo the whole smoke inspector, CO inspectors of the 3-decker or single family, whatever you're selling. And it's almost assured that that's going to be right. So I would make that suggestion.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing year-round people get callous with is candles.
All the time.
All the time.
Clayton has a good candle story.
Oh, I've got a couple. I've been to a couple candle fires, unfortunately. The rule of thumb with a candle is just, when you leave the room, please blow it out. Mm-hmm. So, two of my candle stories, real quick, is one guy, this is an adult, he left it burning on the windowsill of his bedroom. He went out to cook dinner. And we pull up, we got the call, we pull up, I looked up, there's flames coming out of the bedroom window. So we pull a hose line up, we contained it to the bedroom. But all he had to do, this is a grown man, all he had to do was blow the candle out before he went out to cook dinner. Second one is a friend of mine, she said I could tell this story. She works with me part-time at St. Vincent's. And she left her candle burning downstairs in the basement, and her husband at the time, and the 2 boys went upstairs. They went upstairs to eat lunch. She again did not blow the candle out. Well, their dog actually somehow knocked the candle over, and it happened to be right into a hamper of clothes. She had a clothes basket right there. That's what caught first. And then the fire's burning. By the time the smoke detectors went off, they realized they had a decent fire in their basement. They called us, and she told me it was $22,000 worth of damage just because they didn't do this before they went out for lunch.
You know, the Portuguese, they have the Holy Ghost in their homes, and they have a lot of candles around the Holy Ghost crown and stuff like that. And I think people, I've seen this firsthand, and I think people don't know the ratification of that thing if a candle flips over, and it's pretty bad. And but how do you know what they do? You're not going to expect every house that has a Holy Ghost display, right?
No. Right.
Around that time. Cigarettes.
Oh.
Another thing all year round.
We can keep going.
Keep going, and I got a list here.
Yeah.
Cigarettes. You know, from going to fires and doing all this other stuff, I see many times fires are started by cigarettes. Want to talk about that?
Well, actually, you know, it's funny that you bring that up. For years, cooking was the leading cause of fire, and last year, that just flipped back over to where cigarettes are the leading cause of fires, and cooking fires are second. I mean, they both run hand in hand. But same thing. I mean, we've had our tragedies in this city regarding smoking. We had one maybe about 6 or 7 years ago where the building, they should not have been smoking in the building they were in, but they did, and unfortunately the person fell asleep. Next thing you know, the apartment's on fire and a person died. So a lot of times now you see the high rises and different properties, they do not allow smoking within the units, which I think is really a good idea. I mean, the people can go outside and smoke, and I haven't seen too many people fall asleep standing up. So if they're smoking and they're standing outside, much less of a risk.
The other thing with being proactive that we teach the kids is, and the parents, of course, keep matches and lighters out of reach of the kids. Keep them up high, keep them locked, because we do have quite a few curious fire setters in the city of Fall River.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And if they have access to it, they're going to be curious and they're going to see what happens, and that could be a disaster.
Right.
Smoking, people who are on oxygen, no, it takes their face right out.
Right, right. I mean, if, you basically, when you look at it, you can look at the fire triangle. What do you need in order to have a fire? You need heat, fuel, and air. And now all of a sudden, you're supercharging that air with an oxygen-rich environment. So it's going to burn, the intensity is going to burn that much quicker and that much hotter. So yeah, the smoking with oxygen is
Not a good idea.
Definitely not a good idea.
Let's touch on solar panels. It's a popular thing now. Mm-hmm. It's a hazard to the fire department, the firefighters,
Potentially, yep.
if you don't shut the
Power off.
And that's a risk. Open up the roof. You can't open up the roof properly.
Right.
So that's a challenge for the fire department.
It is. Right now, and I mean, it's been a while, when anybody is going to put up solar panels on their roof, they're required to pull a building permit, which will then trigger us to look at the permit. And what we look at is the clearances along the edge of the roof line. Do we have access? Another thing that some people don't understand either is when you're dealing with the solar panels, there's two types of current. There's alternating current, which is less hazardous than direct current. Solar panels generate direct current. Now, you can shut that power source off at the box, but just because you shut it off at the box, those panels are still live.
They're charged, right?
They're charged, and they don't stop charging unless you cover them. So now if you have a fire and the firefighters need to go up on the roof, everything that they're dealing with is live up there.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely creates a hazard for firefighters. And some of the considerations, obviously, when we're going to vent the roof to let all that hot, charged, smoky air out, is going to be the area on the roof where we're going to cut. So,
Could I just touch on two things real quick?
Absolutely.
So I just want to tell the viewing audience, please, any time of year, don't park in front of fire hydrants to impede our access to that. The other thing is always a good idea to have a fire extinguisher. For little small insipid fires, we actually teach fire extinguisher training at some of the schools for the older kids, 14 and older. But those are two good things. Again, thinking proactively, don't park in front of the fire hydrant. And also have an escape plan. Have an escape plan, how to get out of where you live, and a meeting place to make sure that everybody's out of the building.
Accountability.
Yes.
Accountability check.
Yes.
We're running out of time, but the other thing that's a hazard to firefighters now is electric car fires. So that's going to be a big. We're almost out of time, but
right, that's something. I mean, it's almost like technology went ahead of the emergency aspects of it. So that's something that a lot of fire departments are dealing with within the United States, the electric car fires, and that are having issues with.
Well, thank you guys, Mr. Walker and Mr. Medeiros. Thank you for coming on. I mean, we've known each other for a long time, and you guys do a great job.
Thank you for having us here.
Thank you for having me being on my show.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
I appreciate
you.
it. Anytime.
That's it for this program.